I just read another user's story about the smiling man at the laundromat, and it instantly transported me back to a similar high school memory. I was about 15 or 16, and my older brother, who went to the same high school as me, would drive us to school most days of the week since our parents stopped wanting to get up early and we both had zero period that began at 7 a.m. One day, on the way to school, we stopped at a donut shop that was in a sort of remote part of town on a stretch of highway. It was still kind of dark outside before 6:30 a.m. This was in the late 90s or early 2000s, before it was common for teenagers to have their own cell phones, so I didn't have a way to call or text. This shop had nothing around it except for trees and a stretch of empty land. The parking lot was too big for how small this place was. He didn't park us in the very front spot, by the door. To this day, I have no idea why he didn't. He parked about a row and a half from the front and walked in. Nobody was at the counter, so I watched him wait for service. While he was waiting, my eyes wandered and panned suddenly to a man's face, staring daggers at me from one of the tables in the shop. It was very startling, like in movies when they look through binoculars and see someone staring at them through the scope. I immediately looked away and down because it freaked me out. At first, I thought maybe the man was tired and was just kind of spacing out because of how early it was. But I still felt his eyes on me after a few minutes, and although I fought myself to look up, I glanced up and he had a creepy smile on his face. He had short bobbed hair like a dude would have in the 70s. I looked at my brother and it felt like an eternity as he picked the donuts. He had turned around once and I tried to get his attention, but he turned back around to keep choosing. When my brother was talking to the cashier, I noticed the man at the table get up. He never took his eyes off of me, and I remember my heart beating hard in my chest as I looked down since I couldn't think of anything else to do. This is how I was reminded of this memory from the other post. The feeling of helplessness when someone is staring and making you uncomfortable. I hope he would just walk away, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he was approaching the truck. My first thought was to reach over and honk the horn as loud as I could, but he was already about one stride away from the driver's side, and I then noticed the door hadn't auto-locked. It was the kind that had the little pop-up button lock. I only had seconds to choose to lock the door or honk the horn, so I practically leaped over, and I remember slapping down the lock button. Not but 2 or 3 seconds later, the man pulled on the door handle. He turned to walk away, but then turned again and tried to pull harder. I then honked the horn to get attention, but I saw my brother had walked to the other side of the counter out of view. After I honked a second time, the guy walked off past the car, across the street where it was a bit wooded before the highway resumed. When my brother came back, he asked why I was honking and being impatient because it was still early and we wouldn't be late. After I told him some creep tried to get in, he drove around the area, but nobody was around since it had been like 5 more minutes before he got to the car. So after sharing an experience on here, which also is my first submission on this site, I thought of another story I could share. Again, for some insight, I'm a 25-year-old female. This particular incident I'm about to describe happened a couple of years ago at a bar my friend and I frequented weekly. Looking back on it, I realize now how much danger we were in and how fortunate we were to come out unscathed. Also, I apologize in advance for how long this might get. I tend to be very detailed in my storytelling. So before I get ahead of myself, allow me to rewind to a couple of hours before this incident. It was a few hours before my friend had to go into work and we had plans to grab a few drinks before she hit up her shift at a local bar. I had just arrived at her house and we were on our regular walk to the bar. Note, not the same one she works at, which is not by any means a long distance, but does involve weaving through some shady areas and a dark trail that we sometimes take when it's still light outside, and there's enough of us that we can handle ourselves. This night though, it was just me and my friend and it was very dark, so we took the longer way. I remember thinking how menacing the room looked as it glowed an eerie orange in the night sky. A premonition, maybe? Probably not. I'm just a very observant girl. We made it to the bar safe and sound, and were in the middle of ordering our drinks when a group of 9 men, all decked out in business suits, entered the room. Upon second glance, we noticed they had a woman with them. She was young, appearing to be in her early 20s, and unlike the men, who were dressed like they were about to sit down for a business conference, she was dressed in casual jeans and a t-shirt. This was the first detail I noticed that seemed odd to me, but I shrugged it off. I didn't know them and it wasn't my business. As far as I was concerned, they were just a couple of businessmen who just come back from a long and probably very boring conference, and now were just unwinding for the rest of the night. The woman was probably a friend of theirs that met up with them along the way. No big deal at all. Still, they stood out like a sore thumb, and so every so often we would look over at them to find they were already staring in our direction. Okay, fine. They probably just sensed that we've been paying closer attention to them than normal. We paid them no more attention and chattered amongst ourselves about the things we usually do: work, our social lives, and our love lives. Nothing that anyone would find to be a great interest. I tuned out of our conversation though when I felt the men's eyes on us again, and my ears perked at the mention of a few notable keywords. 2 girls, very pretty, and want the blonde. My stomach clenched. If they were talking about us, I was definitely the blonde girl. My friend's hair is as dark as night, and I am just the opposite. With the way they were looking over at our table, I knew what they meant to us. Needless to say, I was instantly uneasy at the idea of 9 random men talking amongst themselves in hushed voices about me and my friend. Then, to my dismay, the woman of the group came over to our table. This caught my friend's attention too, and her eyes scanned the woman with an expression that mirrored my own. The woman smiled brightly at us, instantly giving off a friendly vibe. Too friendly. I hope this doesn't come off as creepy, but I just wanted to tell you that you girls are absolutely beautiful, she said. Thanks, I said, instantly wary. My friends nodded a thanks too, barely looking at her, but she too looked uneasy. The woman seemed to take this to mean an invitation to sit with us because that's exactly what she did. Before I realized what was happening, she had scooted into the booth seat right next to me. Hey, see those guys over there? She said, pointing at the table of men from which she had come. Yeah? Well, they've been wanting to talk to you girls from the very moment they saw you both. But you know, they are really shy, so they asked me to come over here and talk to you for them. Ah, that's nice, I said, completely baffled by how weird all of this was. If they want to talk, though, they could have just come over here. I told you they're shy, she said, and then giggled like a schoolgirl. That made her seem way younger than she was. Yeah, I thought. All 9 of these fully grown men are surely too shy to talk to a couple of young 20-something-year-olds. See the cute dark-haired one with the beard on the far left? She asked, pointing to one of the men at the table that fit that description. He's been dying to ask you out, she said to me, and then pointing to another guy she proceeded to gush to my friend about how he was interested in her as well. When we didn't look as excited as she expected, she prattled on about how she had known these men all of her life and how sweet and trustworthy they were, and that we just had to take her word for it because she's a girl too and she has our backs. Something like that. Yeah, how very convenient that the supposedly sweetest guys of the group had an eye on each of us respectively. I fought the urge to roll my eyes at how obvious a setup this was. I waited impatiently for her to just cut to the chase and get to the proposition she had clearly come over here for. I know how this must look to you girls, and you are probably used to this all the time. I definitely get it. I would think the same thing. Us girls, we have to look out for each other, right? Yes, she actually had the nerve to say this. You seem like smart girls. It's good to have a good head on your shoulders, but you have nothing to worry about. I've known these guys since we were children, and they wouldn't harm a hair on anyone's head, much less 2 pretty girls like yourselves. More flattery, more grooming. I had to hand it to her. This girl was a crafty manipulator. She was telling us everything a girl in our position would want to hear, playing the female ally card to gain our trust. It was becoming blatantly obvious what role this woman played in this men's agenda. A female pursuer would seem much less threatening to two young females. I was disgusted. Anyways, the guys and I are about to leave for name of a local club, and we would love it if you girls came along. You can come your own way and meet us there if you are more comfortable. They would definitely understand. They are totally gentlemen. I bet. And don't worry, they will pay for everything. Final red flag unleashed. That was far shadier than the motives of your average pickup artist. My friend and I shared a look of bewilderment from across the table, and then nodded in understanding as we came to an unspoken agreement as how to deal with the situation. Well, we appreciate it and tell them we are really flattered. My friend said politely with the fakest smile I've ever seen her muster plastered on her face. But we are just leaving. The girl frowns now, not even bothering to hide her disappointment. Why? Where are you girls off to? My friend shot her a look of annoyance, clearly put off by this woman's nosiness, but she said, I have to work in 30 minutes. This actually wasn't entirely a lie. My friend was due to come into work, but not for a few hours. And this is when the girl's demeanor changed. Gone was the personable and sweet girl trying to be our friend to reveal a freaking snake. I'm not exaggerating. In seconds, this woman transformed before our very eyes into a stone-cold predator. She was still speaking in the same friendly and polite tone, but her smile had twisted into a sneer, and her eyes had narrowed into beady stilts as she glared at my friend. How much? What? My friend asked, completely baffled. How much would you be making tonight? She asked, although it sounded more like a demand than an inquiry. My friend divulged the amount. The girl nodded and then walked off. We thought that was the end of it, and we breathed a sigh of relief. We could see she looked like she was conferring with her comrades about something. And then before we could move a muscle, she was walking back towards our table, looking more menacing than ever now. She took her seat next to me again. What if I told you we would pay you twice the amount of money you'd be making tonight if you came to party with us? She asked. I would say, that's cool, but like you guys would do that anyway. My friend said with a strange smile. The girl smiled, taking out her purse and pulling out the frickin' fattest wad of cash, dumping it on the table in front of us. Our jaws dropped. This is triple the amount you'd be paid tonight, she said. She even counted it for us. Now we knew something was terribly wrong and that her male friends weren't just pickup artists or even rapists. This was a business conference after all, just a very different kind. Okay, my friend blurted out. I shot her a look that read something like, what the heck are you doing? But she insisted that we go with them and that it would be fun. Here I was worried that I would have to do some serious damage control when she said we'll go. I just have to go to the bathroom and freshen up. Oh. The woman seemed pleased with this and smiling, she put the money back in her purse and walked back to the table. One of the men looking over at us smiled and waved. We jumped up from our seats and practically raced to the direction of the washrooms, which are in a hallway right around the corner that would conceal us from their praying eyes. As soon as we got the chance to talk, we shared the same thought that these people were running a sex trafficking ring and we needed to get out of here now. Our plan was to take the back exit, which was further down the hall from the bathrooms. But after some deliberation, we considered that the woman might be onto what we were really planning and would be waiting for us on the other side of the door. The back door also led into an alley, and we agreed that especially in a situation like this, it was far too risky. As luck would have it too, her phone was temporarily out of service and mine was dead. We decided that we would have to enlist a staff member's help. We walked back to the table and told them that we would be going with them just as soon as we order our drinks. One of them offered to get it for us, but we were already power walking over to the bartender. We told him everything. They must have noticed we were talking to him for longer than was necessary to order a few drinks, and thankfully they booked it out of there. All the same, the bartender told us not to go out there as they might be waiting for us outside, and that he would call a cab for us to make sure we got home safely. Thankfully, when our cab arrived and we stepped outside, half expecting them to jump out of the shadows and hit us over the heads with bats, there was nobody in sight. We hurriedly climbed into the cab and took it back to her place. I'm fully convinced that if we had agreed to go with them, we would have been drugged and sold into the sex trade. I'd probably be holed up in some prison somewhere across the world right now. The suits, the business-like nature of their meeting, the woman they sent over to try to gain our trust, the bribery. This was some seriously shady stuff. The final nail in the coffin, though. A week later, a girl from the area was declared missing, and her body was found dumped in a creek outside of the city a month after this incident. Apparently, the last she was spotted was in that area of town. I don't know if there's any connection to these two events. They very well could have had nothing to do with each other, but I can't help thinking there was. Edit. In my recollection of this event, there was a very specific detail I forgot to include in this story. In addition to the woman trying to lure us away with temptations and playing the female ally, one of her other games was pulling the lone female card by trying to guilt us into going with them on the pretense of her being the only girl in the group and how boring her night would be if we didn't go. It's a small detail, but it uncovers yet another layer of manipulation she had used to try to get us to come with her. Of course, that tactic didn't work on us either. I thought I would include it for completion purposes as I just now remembered that specific part of it. A few years ago, I female lived in my car. I was fresh out of college and overwhelmed with student debt, and being young, dumb, and 21, I thought car living was a good way to save some money. I live in Southern California, so the rent is very high, and the weather is temperate enough to make this possible year-round. One night, I decided to park in a neighborhood I thought I knew well. It was right by the beach and a couple of blocks next to an ex-boyfriend of mine, so I felt safe there as I had walked the streets at night plenty of times. I parked, locked the doors, hung up the curtains so nobody could look in, plugged in my earplugs so the cars passing wouldn't wake me, and fell asleep. Now my earplugs were effective but crappy, and I could always count on them falling off in the middle of the night. I actually preferred this because it meant I could fall asleep but still hear my phone alarm in the morning. It was about 2 a.m. when I woke up to my earplugs already having fallen off and something feeling wrong. Odd scratching noises were coming from the window. It started at the passenger side door, then moved to the backseat doors. I froze, unsure of what to make of it, painfully aware that I leave my windows slightly cracked at night for ventilation. I honestly didn't know what to do, so I stayed frozen trying to make sense of it all. That's when the flashlight turned on and some freaking weirdo unmistakably shone his light in, trying to find a crack in the curtains. And to my horror, he found one and shone it right where my face was. It's hard to explain, but the position of my head made it so I could piece together what was happening based on the light everywhere. But he couldn't see my eyes. The scratching then continued and I knew I was screwed. This went from potential attempted car theft to somebody knowing I was in the car. Edit to clarify. I had these psychedelic curtains at the time. Very eye-catching and hard to miss. Stupid, I know. I got black curtains immediately after this incident. This is why I suspect he knew I was in the car the whole time. He just put two and two together. Also, I don't know for sure, but the scratching noises sounded like he was trying to shove something in the cracks of my window and grab my door lock, but was failing to gain any traction because they were barely cracked. During those times, I slept with a bat and mace by my seat, but I was literally paralyzed with fear and couldn't will myself to grab them. However, my last year of college, I took a class called RAD, Rape Aggression Defense, and remember the number one rule: yell confidently and confrontationally at this weirdo. I wish I could say I screamed something badass, but what left my lips was a loud, aggravated, and forceful "Excuse me." Like I was Link yelling at the Princess of Hyrule in that shitty TV show. It was super lame, but it echoed. To my immense relief, I hear the sounds of his footsteps running away at top speed. But I kid you not, this jerk was laughing as he ran like it was some stupid game. I was still paralyzed, but eventually him running gave me the courage to get up, grab my bat, and shove my way to the front seat, where I started the car and sped away. I didn't see him and I spent the night at a friend's house. I live in an apartment now. It wasn't until the next morning I realized I had parked 1 block away from a bar, and at the time of the incident, the bar had just closed. This happened a few years ago. I live in England and I was 23 at the time. I had come out of a serious long-term relationship at 22. We were engaged and I was absolutely broken. I didn't even think about dating or any type of love interest for a year at least. I had worked hard to put myself back together and had seen a counselor and was taking anti-anxiety medication. I decided it was time to try and find love again. Big mistake. I met a man on Tinder. He was 27 and seemed really friendly, and we hit it off really quick. We went on a fair few dates and saw each other for a few months. As the relationship progressed, he started to get more and more possessive. He didn't like the fact that I had my own job, friends, house, or a close relationship with my family. I knew I had to cut things off quickly because it was becoming too much to handle and I could not survive another horrific relationship experience. I was already too fragile. I told him that I still wasn't ready to get serious with someone and needed to spend more time alone to look after myself. He took it well. What a relief. Until he reached his own home and the texts and phone calls started. He called me all sorts of horrendous names and then would come back with saying how he's not worthy, how I'm amazing, and how he's just devastated that he lost me. I firmly told him that I had meant what I had said and that things were not going to happen. He accepted that for a while. I started getting ads on various social media that were fake accounts he had made. He called me on various numbers, withheld numbers and public phone numbers. He turned up on my drive without warning. He turned up at my workplace and harassed a colleague. I threatened him with the police if he didn't stop, and I moved back in with my parents as I didn't feel safe at home. For months, he tried to contact me in various ways, and it became exhausting trying to block him from my life. Then one day, he changed his tactics. My grandpa had recently passed away and we were very close, so I visited his grave weekly to put flowers on it and sit and think. I arrived one morning and there is a letter on the grave. Only my family and I ever go there, so I was very confused. It was from Jay, begging me to take him back, telling me he would do anything and everything to make me his again. It got threatening towards the end and I decided that enough was enough. This had gone too far. I contacted the police and had a restraining order put in place. I am still not confident enough to date again. I guess you could say I'm scared. So this just happened. Bit of background of the last 25 minutes. I just got home from a reasonably big night. It's 4:30 a.m. and stinking hot in this part of Australia right now. I walked in the door and opened the fridge and was so happy to find 3 icy cold beers in the fridge. I take 2 of them and walk upstairs to bed to read and drink myself into a boozy sleep. First issue. The beers are not twist tops. They need a bottle opener, and after some sloppy drunken attempts at using the handle of the drawer of my bedside table, I head back downstairs to use an actual bottle opener. I turn on the kitchen lights, which are so bright that they make the space behind my eyes burn. I squint around to find the bottle opener, which I can't find, so I use the solid edge of a large kitchen knife. It's a risky choice, but the bottle cap is now off of the beer, and I'm happy. I turn off the alien blinding kitchen light and go to head upstairs. But something through the front window of my house that looks onto the street catches my eye. I stop at the bottom of the stairs, and all the hairs on the back of my neck and arms stand up. I turn my head slowly, and my eyes and brain are trying to make sense of what I'm looking at. It looks like a rain-drenched woman in a fancy white dress, gazing at me through the window. Oh shit, it actually is. I pause and take the longest inhale of my life. She's glaring at me like she hates me. She has mascara running down her face, and she is drenched from the rain. Her arms are extended, and she's leaning her head towards me like her body language is trying to say, "Look at me. Look at what you've done." I'm shitting bricks. But the rational side of my brain kicks in and I think, is she okay? Does she need help? I slowly walk over to the window, her gaze still locked onto mine. We are now literally within 1 meter of each other. I state loudly through the glass, "Are you okay out there? Do you need help? Is anyone with you?" Then it dawns on me. My gate is locked in. There is an 8-foot high fence which is very difficult to climb. How did she get in? She doesn't respond to my inquiry. She just keeps that hateful look in her eyes. We stood there for about another 30 seconds. I was looking around nervously trying to make sense of this, and she was just glaring into my soul. And then she finally opened her mouth as if to say something. Finally. But it wasn't words that came out of her mouth. It was an insanely high-pitched meow, like a cat. And then she starts clawing at the window with her novelty-sized fingernails. What in the actual heck? I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. She's clearly not very well. Not very well at all. Then in the background behind the fence, I see another woman, 20-something, dressed in a short black club dress with the glow of her phone lighting up her face. She sees the woman in white at my window and yells, "Michelle, that's the wrong frickin' house." The rain-soaked nightmare Catwoman's eyes go from, "I hate you and want you to die," to, "Wow, I'm so sorry and embarrassed," and she runs over to the fence and impressively army commando flings herself over it. I can then hear a group of ladies peeing themselves laughing, saying, "Jason's house is number 25, not 23. That poor guy is probably going to call the cops now." All I know is that I'm so happy that I was on the receiving end of a misdirected prank and I didn't have to be killed by a well-dressed hybrid cat demon woman. And now I have to go back down to the kitchen to open my other beer, but I'm still too afraid. It all started when I was about 9 years old. I had a friend in primary school that lived very close to me on my street, and I would go to her house often. She had 2 older brothers. One was in his 20s and the other was 16. I used to train to be a gymnast, so I was very thin, and my parents would often drop me at my friend's house after the gym. I would still be in my gym clothes, usually shorts and a tank top. And one hot day I took my jacket off. Her 16-year-old brother, I think, let's say his name is John, walks in and sees me in my gym clothes. He just stops and stares at me and then asks if he can show me and my friend, let's say Jane, something. He takes us into his room and closes the door and starts showing us his Pokemon cards. I like Pokemon, so we chilled there for about 15 minutes, but Jane is acting really nervous and keeps saying she wants to go and play on the trampoline. I give in and we go. I say thanks for showing us the cards and we head outside. A few weeks later, he asks us if we want to watch some Pokemon in his room, and we go in. This time he locks the door. I didn't think anything of it, but Jane starts to freak out. He tells her to shut up and undress. She undresses straight away like she has done this before. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And he tells me if I don't get my clothes off, he will tell on me for being a slut. Now, being only 9, this somehow seemed legit to me. I thought, oh no, my parents are going to think I was being bad and that I would get in a lot of trouble. So I listen. I try to cover myself with the sheets on his bed, but he pulls them away and tells Jane and me to stand on his bed and dance. Jane refuses and he pulls out a length of rope with a bolt tied to the end. He swings it over his head and threatens to hit us and tell everyone that we're skanks with it if we don't. She starts to cry and we get up and dance as best as we could. Having no idea how to do this, he sits back and watches. Doesn't do anything, just watches. After a while, a door closes somewhere in the house and he tells us to get dressed and then tells us to get out. The next time he told us to come to his room, I said no, but I was in front of his mom, and when she asked why I couldn't say so, I went with him. After we went in, he told us to undress and then told Jane to put her clothes back on because she was fat and liked me better. Apparently, she was kind of chubby to him and I was so thin people thought I was sick. He told me to dance again and then we left. This went on till I was about 10, maybe 11. All the while I believed I was in the wrong and if I told, I would get in as much trouble as he would, or he would really hurt Jane. Then the day came when seeing me dance naked wasn't enough. He had just turned 18 and told me to sit on a chair by his bed. He got up and walked over to me with his you-know-what out and almost picked me up. He put me on the bed and lay on top of me. I already knew what was coming. I reached down the side of the bed to the metal baseball bat that I'd seen there many times before and shoved him off as best as I could. He sat up and said, "I was hoping you would fight." And when he came back down, I hit him in the head with the bat. He fell back and fell off the bed and leapt up. At this point, I was seeing red and didn't care if I got in trouble, and I brought the bat down hard on the arm he was shielding himself with and heard a crack. I then started beating the ever-living shit out of him. Told him if he ever touched me or Jane again, I would tell everyone what he did, and I left. It wasn't until after I got home and washed the blood off myself that I thought, shit, how is he going to explain being beaten to a pulp without me getting in trouble or telling people what he did? Turns out he thought about this too, and living in a Queenslander house on stilts, there was a very long metal staircase at the front of the house. He lay at the bottom, and when his parents got home, said the Fight Club classic. I fell down the stairs. I found out from Jane that he had fractured his right arm, 2 ribs, and his nose was broken. They moved about 6 months later, and I've never seen him or Jane again. I hope for his sake we don't meet again. First things first, I am not the best storyteller, so apologies in advance for that. Second, I'm naturally a very shy person, and I have pretty bad social anxiety. I'm also pretty good at pretending to enjoy conversations with strangers. This combination does not work to my favor often, so it's kind of why I stuck around for so long. This happened last year in June. I had just turned 19 in May, and I've been told multiple times that I look older than I am. Because of this, I tend to get hit on by older men a lot. My father and I had gotten into an argument the day before, and the following morning I just felt bad. I went to work, did my job, and clocked out. I couldn't bring myself to come home right away. Since I work early in the morning from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., I thought it was the perfect chance to go to a park nearby. Since no one really goes there that early except for some joggers, I was expecting to be alone. As I drove through the parking lot, I noticed a man sitting by himself on a bench. I wouldn't pass him walking, so I didn't think anything of it. Packed my car and got out. As I neared the entrance to the playscape, I could see this man staring at me. He had a creepy smile, and he was bobbing his head to the music blasting on his speaker. I felt like I could feel his stare as I made my way to the swings. The guy left me alone for a good hour, and I had some good time to think. I really believe he left me alone because of the kids who came along from a day camp program. As soon as the kids left and I thought about leaving, I suddenly heard the music getting louder. It was also coming from behind me. Of course, I was confused and saw the man coming towards me. He had the biggest smile on his face and gave me the greasiest sounding "Hey" I've ever heard. I just mumbled out a hello in response. He took it upon himself to get close and lean on the poles holding the swings up. He stood there for a good minute. Man. Hey, what's your name? Me. Him. I'm Joseph. I'm shy but not stupid. I couldn't bring myself to just get up and leave, but I refused to tell him info. So I lied about almost everything. Also keep in mind, I don't remember everything that was said. Me. I'm Ken. Man. Where are you from? Ypsilanti. Mind if I sit down next to you? It's a free country, I said. He took a seat on the swing next to me. I just saw you walking down over there and I thought, damn, she's pretty. Maybe we could talk and get to know each other. The memories here are a bit hazy, but the guy was trying to impress me or something. He was going on and on about how he's an outstanding fellow, and how his lady friends loved his company, that he was always a gentleman to women. And I just sat there nodding and not really saying anything, but, oh really? Okay, and cool. Somehow he gets to the topic of age, and the guy shows me his driver's license. This old man was my dad's age, guys. He looked way older than 40. How old are you? People always say I'm younger than I look. Me. I'm 19. His ugly black beads practically lit up. Oh, you're younger than I thought. Do you go to school? You must go to insert here university since you live in Ypsilanti. No, I go to school in another state. What state? I travel a lot. Maybe we could see each other then. I'd rather not, I said. I like my privacy. Oh, come on. Live a little bit. Why don't you give me your number and we'll talk a bit? You'll see it's not too bad. He placed his nasty hand on my leg. I didn't immediately remove it. I couldn't believe that this was actually going on. He just stared at me rubbing my leg and I stared at his hand. Honestly, this must have been a few seconds, but it felt like his hand was there forever. I pulled my leg away and hoped for the confidence to tell him off. Before I replied, a jogger came past. She must have noticed how uncomfortable I looked because she made her way over. Lady, wonderful morning, isn't it? How are y'all feeling? We're fine, the man said. The lady looked at me. I'm okay, I said. It's such a nice day for a father and daughter hangout, she said. Me. I don't actually. And the man cut me off, saying, Isn't it? I made a face, but I truly believe this guy was trying to pretend he was my dad. Maybe he wasn't, I don't know, but he was obviously trying to get her to leave. I refused to allow this. It took some bravery on my part. I know. Bravery. For speaking? Me. It would be nice if my dad were out with me today. Lady. Oh, he's not your dad? I shook my head. Lady. Well, it's still a good morning. Maybe you should call him up for a walk or something, you know what I mean? Her eyes looked between me and the man. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think it's time for me to go anyways. Is that so? Well, I hope you have a great day. Drive safe. She started to jog away, but she slowed her pace to more of a brisk walk. She would look back at us every couple of seconds or so. I was so thankful for her. I don't think I could have left that conversation by myself. I got up. Me. Bye, Joseph. Nice meeting you. Man. About that number. Can I get it? We can talk more and maybe we can go out a couple of times. Oh no, I don't give my number out. What if I gave you mine and you texted me? Nope. Sorry, bye. Turned away from him and practically ran to my car. Tears were threatening to fall from my cheeks and I was shaking. The lady came to my window and asked me if I wanted her to call the police, but I said no and thanked her. I left, and when I got home, I told my dad everything. I avoided going to the park alone after, and I haven't seen him since. Edit. I really appreciate all the comments. I originally posted this just so I could get the story off my chest, since only my family knows about it. But hearing how much you all feel for my situation and understand how gross it was makes me feel pretty damn happy. I also appreciate how understanding you all are of my anxiety. That's not something I always get, and knowing that even strangers care is refreshing. A few weeks ago, I posted a story about being accosted by a pimp because of my dumbass, selfish ex-boyfriend. People seem interested in hearing about the other terrible situations he got me into, so here's one of them. This happened on a Sunday. On this particular day, I was at my boyfriend's house. He lived with his dad, stepmom, younger half-brother, and his stepmom's mom. We were lying in bed watching TV, and he was texting. He was getting more and more agitated. Finally, he jumped out of bed and asked if he could take my car and debit card up the street to a little convenience store to get something to drink. Now let me explain. If you missed the other post, this guy was an addict. I didn't fully realize this until later, and even so, I always believed I could save people. I can't. And I didn't want to just give up on him. But he would sneak into my purse while I was sleeping, take my debit card, and withdraw $100 from my bank account while I was at work. He got my card number by watching me at an ATM. I eventually changed my PIN. Anyways, I of course said no. He couldn't take my car or my card because I couldn't trust him with it. He began getting really upset, insisting I give him my debit card. I knew this wasn't about getting a bottle of pop, so I asked him what he really wanted. Eventually, he admitted that he had borrowed $40 from a friend, and the friend was threatening both my ex and me if he didn't get the money back. I asked to see the text, and after much prodding, he showed me. It said something like, "You're playing me sweet. I get my money or you get messed up. I know your girl's car too. Let me put it this way. It would be a shame if something happened to your pretty girlfriend. I can name 10 dudes that would love to take that piece of shit off your hands. They could have fun beating the crap out of you too. I'm not trying to play here. I get my money or I come looking for both of you." I felt sick. I handed him his phone and agreed to give him the $40. Afterwards, we met his friends and he gave him the money. This guy looked at me and he winked at me with this taunting smile on his face. I drove my boyfriend home and made an excuse to leave. Curled up in my bed the rest of the day, ignoring texts from anyone and just wondering how serious that threat had been. This happened to me in 1970 when I was 11 and a half years old. My two brothers and I have always had to walk to and from grade school each day for 8 years, since they didn't have a bus for our area. This was quite a distance away, and there's no way in current times there wouldn't have been a bus for our grade school days. We were the last house on the right in a very small subdivision on a dead-end street. Next to us was a ginormous cornfield with an old barn and house and a lot of acres of fruit trees and woods. As a shortcut, I would take this deserted woods trail and follow it to what will lead me to my house after about 15 minutes. That particular day, I turned right into the woods and the trail, as I had done every year for 6 years by then. It was the end of winter and I still had my long blue winter coat on. I'd walked about 5 minutes on the trail and for some reason just happened to look behind me, quite a distance away. I walked fast. I saw a man enter the woods and was on the trail I was on. Nobody else was around and for some reason I started walking faster, thinking I was just being silly. When I looked behind me, I saw the man also begin to pick up pace. This scared me. I really started walking fast. I saw he was too when I again glanced over my shoulder. I don't know why, but that day I felt fear, so I began running and noticed he too was running. I was really afraid then and no longer had the time to glance behind me. I broke into a full run as fast as I could until I came out on the road in front of my house. Normally, I walk the trail a bit further and end up at our garage and back door. But that day I sprinted into where our little street on the dead end began, and that brought me right in front of our house. I didn't want him to know I lived there, so at that point, I stopped and was catching my breath. He was only maybe 10 to 15 seconds behind me, and he was caught up with me, but he didn't stop. As he kept a much slower pace then, he looked at me and said, "You're a fast runner," and kept going. I stayed where I was until I couldn't see him anymore, and then I turned into our driveway. For months after that, I would take a different way home and didn't walk those trails again for some time. I don't know if I was just being paranoid, but why else would a young man, maybe he was 18 or so, very young, begin running after me for a good 10 minutes like that? He scared the shit out of me. Creepy runner man. It's a good thing. I was indeed a very fast runner, or what might have occurred on that deserted woods trail. I don't know. I'm almost 63 now and I can't run like that anymore. So, I am a very, very active skater and I often go out to street spots to try to skate them. A lot of the time, I meet some less than unsavory people, but this time it took the cake. Now that the introduction is done, let's set the scene. It's around 6:30 p.m., a perfect day for skating, and I'm just skating a spot around a public park called the Rosa Parks Circle. I was doing my thing when this tall man came up to me and told me that I was doing a good job. Jay. A creepy man who said his name was Jay. "Hey, you're doing a really good job." Me. "Hey, thanks. I've been working on skating for a while now, and I think I've been doing a really good job recently. I tend to trust people too much." Jay. "What you're doing is a really good job. My name is Jay, I'm 55 years old and bi." At this point, I kind of knew what was coming. I'm very good at detecting people's implications, thankfully. Throughout this entire conversation, he kept mentioning his sexuality, and I tried my best to try to get out of this conversation as soon as I could. I was trying to do a few tricks down a small ledge. The guy was just staring at me while I was doing it, and it felt super uncomfortable. He pulled me aside one more time, and this is what he said. "I really like you. I know that you're younger, but as long as you can send it, we can still hook up." Me. No, we can't. I'm only 14 and the consent age in this state is 16. I'm not really feeling comfortable with the things you're saying, and I need to go home anyways very soon. It was nice to meet you, but I need to leave. Jay. Okay, but remember not to tell anyone. This happened today and I told my parents, and after they got off the phone with my sister, they're going to be making a police report about this man. I was extremely livid on my way home, and it didn't help that my entire playlist on YouTube is full of hard rock. So Jay, let's not meet. Update. I went back to skate again, but he was there. He told me that we were such good friends and that he was drunk and that he was sorry. I skated past and looped around and took a picture. I think he was still drunk because he straight up rattled off his name. My mom's on the phone with a detective.